Hi, everyone, and welcome to this part 5 of our Tech Talk series. Today, I'm going to be talking about migration and ScaleArc in the cloud. This session is going to be a little bit perhaps less hands-on, a little bit more theoretical. Each migration is very specific and subtle in its and driven by the applications, and therefore we need to generalize, take it a little bit to higher level before we jump and go a little bit deeper into how ScaleArc actually work within a cloud, how can it be deployed? Because of course, when we talk about migration, we're most of the time talking about migration to the cloud. So for our agenda today, I'm going to start with a little bit of overview of all the migration challenges. What do we want to achieve? How can we achieve that during the migration? When using ScaleArc, how can ScaleArc help you in performing a successful migration? I'm going to show you how it actually happens on a high level. How does migration step by step would be happening? And then I'm going to move over to kind of zoom in a little bit on the deployment in the actual cloud. How would ScaleArc fit in a cloud? How can you leverage the cloud features of availability zones and load balancers and all of those features that cloud brings? How can ScaleArc fit into that? And then I'm going to move over to last section, which I'm going to elaborate a little bit about how features of ScaleArc can extend and can capitalize on the cloud benefits and can basically further produce value to your company. And of course, we're going to have a Q&A session. If there are any questions, please do not hesitate to ask them in the question box. So first and foremost, what do we understand? Why do we migrate? What do we migrate within the database universe? Of course, migration to cloud is a particular subject of this webinar. But when we talk about migration, I'm not only talking about migration to cloud. You can imagine that we actually do have customers that were considering migrating off the cloud and then perhaps moving through to data centers, expanding to another data center, or perhaps you only upgrading your hardware infrastructure in your on-prem solution. That also can be considered migration. So in all of those areas, ScaleArc can help you to perform those. And last but not least, also the technology migration. This is something that is super beneficial that ScaleArc can help you achieve. Perhaps you want to migrate from MS SQL to Azure SQL, or maybe from Azure SQL to RDS or MySQL to Aurora. All of those changes can be facilitated with ScaleArc and make much easier. So one thing that I guess is the most critical during each migration is the zero downtime paradigm. If you had a chance to watch our session about a failover, you're already familiar with the concept of zero downtime within ScaleArc. And within migration, this concept comes very handy because, of course, we need zero downtime to provide the uninterrupted services during the migration. Of course, this is usually the most common business goal, but there's way more benefits to that. So essentially, if you are able to provide zero downtime during migration, your logistics of your migration are way simpler, because when ScaleArc provides zero downtime, it decouples the application logic from the database topology. And as such, you can actually decouple the process of migration of those two. So imagine you can migrate your database, run both locations in parallel until your application, and then give a thumbs up to your application team to start migration, and they can do it at your own pace. And once you have fully migrated, validated that everything is working, then you can start decommissioning your old platform, your previous deployment. And in this way, this decoupling of application from the database makes the logistics much, much simpler. And last but not least, because the logistics are simpler, there is less overhead in arranging all of this, in navigating this process of migration, the flexibility that it gives you. Essentially, now migration does not need to be such a huge effort, such a huge pain. And what you can do, you can actually benefit from all the new benefits. Perhaps some other platform provides better cost to your solution, or have some features that your current platform does not have, that your application might benefit of. So all of those possibilities are now much, much easier to achieve, because the migration towards those goals is easier thanks to ScaleArc. So how does ScaleArc achieve this zero downtime during migration? And this is perhaps a little bit of a recap to our previous sessions about load balancing and zero downtime. But just in case you haven't got a chance to go through them, ScaleArc will provide, first of all, the central endpoint for your application to connect. So as such, any topological changes will be fully abstracted away from your application, and you can easily, smoothly replicate, make sure that the data integrity is intact in your cloud as well as in your premises before you decide to start dynamically rerouting traffic. And then, of course, inevitably at the end of the day, when you decide to phase away, to move your primary node, to move your master server from your current location to the new environment, there will be a little bit of a downtime. There will be some downtime that will perhaps be a little bit bigger than in usual failover scenarios when you do it across one location, purely because the resynchronization time, the making sure that there is no data loss, the data integrity is not affected, might take a little bit longer across when moving to cloud. And Surge Queue comes invaluable in this circumstances, because it can essentially buffer your traffic and hold this traffic until you're fully migrated, your failover is finished, and you're ready to basically accept the traffic again. And last, again, but not least, all of this is brilliant, but automation needs to be in place. Some of our customers are migrating one or two databases. Perhaps it's not as critical, but in some cases, some customers are looking into migrating hundreds of databases, or tens of, or essentially in this situation, the effort can be further minimalized by automating all of those steps. So ScaleArc provides you with this REST API that you can leverage to whether add a server to the cluster, remove the server from the cluster, or change the roles of the servers, trigger failover, or some other things you can actually do through this REST API, and therefore it will make it much simpler in ongoing migrations across all your database environments. So now, let me give you a kind of small visualization of how, on a high level, would the migration, what would be the steps of the migration. So let's imagine this is our current deployment, and of course, it is very application specific. In one situation, you might have more servers, perhaps maybe a few locations, perhaps your topology is slightly different, but in general abstraction, you have some application server that you can use ScaleArc, connect to ScaleArc, and then ScaleArc will basically hide away this topology that would split basically to a read server or servers, and then to your master node. So as such, this represents the topology. So the first step of any migration would be, of course, to provision your newly minted environment. And as such, you would basically start deploying your application, start deploying your ScaleArc, your database. All of those bits and pieces would need to be deployed into your new environment. And then, of course, usually it takes some testing, some fiddling, some network setup, and those kind of details to get this right. And then once you're happy with this step, the next step would usually be to synchronize the data across. So of course, during initial testing, you wouldn't probably be worried as much as on the about the data that sits in your newly minted environment. But then when you start migrating, of course, you want your data to be fully in sync with your current location. So you would basically add this to the cluster. And when doing that, you can notice one thing, that right now, as soon as the databases are synchronized, and this can take time, of course, depending on the size of the database, depending on the amount of traffic, depending on the latency between your on-premise and cloud location, this might take a lot of time. But once you do that, right now you have two fully operational environments that can work absolutely seamlessly in parallel, basically. So right now, this is the moment that you can tell your application team to start migrating over the applications. And they can do it absolutely at their own pace, because the next step, which is basically moving over the master node to your cloud deployment, is essentially completely abstracted away from your application environment. So it's invisible as such. Utilizing zero downtime, utilizing surge queue technology, this would basically be invisible for applications. So application team can proceed at their will, at their pace. And then once you're in this stage, you can then, of course, keep monitoring your legacy ScaleArc deployment to see, once you're happy that there is no traffic going in, you can basically start decommissioning this part of your environment. Or perhaps, and we've seen that with some of our customers, perhaps you might want to run in this hybrid mixed mode, whereby some of your applications are on-premise, some on them are in cloud. Or perhaps you might want to keep the on-premise deployment as your disaster recovery environment and treat it as such, and only use it during the disaster event. So right now, let me zoom in a little bit on the actual deployment in the cloud. So you might be familiar with the how is ScaleArc deployed within on-premises solution. You might be familiar how is the high availability working there. Now, cloud provides a new paradigms, such as availability zones and those kind of benefits that perhaps we can leverage here within our newly minted database environment. So consider this being like zoomed in on the cloud aspect, on the cloud deployment. So this is one of the possibilities of how can we deploy ScaleArc. It's a pretty classic deployment, whereby in on premises you might notice that I've put an icon of a load balancer here in front of ScaleArc. So within on-premise solution, you would usually deploy ScaleArcs within the same subnet, sharing the same virtual IP address. Now, of course, that might not be the best idea within cloud. Of course, they would not share subnets by the simple fact that they're in different availability zones. So we have adapted ScaleArc to the cloud, so we can actually work seamlessly within load balancers in the cloud, and as such, it will capitalize on all the load balancer benefits, their high availability, all the features of them, and then load balancer can actually redirect traffic to your active instance, and then passive instance will constantly monitor and replicate from the active instance, and in case of any failure, it will promote itself to being an active instance, and as such, it will start accepting traffic from the load balancer. And this is like a first, the simplest kind of deployment within cloud. And of course, the load balancer could be ELB from the AWS or Azure load balancer or some other form of load balancer. But in this deployment, you're basically mimicking the kind of all the features that you would have had within on-premise solution. Now, what that allows you actually to do, this cloud deployment allows you to take it one step further. So what you can actually achieve when you have this load balancer, you can actually start putting your ScaleArc in the active configuration. And as such, you might notice here that, of course, we have availability zone 1, availability zone 2, but you can start adding those availability zones or new regions. And what we found with some of our customers, this is the topology that they can that can be leveraged in geographically spread applications, whereby, let's say, you have people in Europe, people in US, people in Africa or Asia. They're connecting to their local data centers instead of the globally available, instead of going through continental, transatlantic, or trans-Pacific kind of connectivity, which introduces a lot of latency. They can connect to their local hosts, and only write traffic is being routed by ScaleArc to this primary node. Everything else is coming from your local deployment. And in this way, you can actually not only increase your redundancy, your availability, but also kind of bring this application to the geographically replicated low latency deployment. So this is a little bit of a kind of overview of how can ScaleArc be deployed in the cloud. But we often get the question, how can a cloud deployment benefit from ScaleArc? There are various solutions such as database as a service, such as Aurora or Azure SQL. There is platform as a service that can easily be scale up, and to kind of show you how ScaleArc, which points of ScaleArc can help you with the cloud. I've kind of distilled 5 points, and those are the kind of 5 points of why would most of the companies want to move to the cloud. And I've went through them, and what I've did notice is that in each and every case, whether you're moving because of a simplicity or scalability, ScaleArc can further improve this argument, this aspect of moving to the cloud. So, and to kind of go through it very briefly, like if you move to the cloud because of the fact that it's so simple to provision hardware. Yes, it is simple, but ScaleArc can give you even further simplicity to provision, to administrate, to see the traffic, to manage your traffic between your databases, to enable the load balancing, the read-write split. And that leads me to another point, which is scalability. Yes, you can add servers in the cloud. You can easily provision servers. You can change the size of the server in the cloud. You can change the tier of the database. But if anyone tried changing a tier from standard to premium in Azure SQL, there is downtime. There's always a downtime. And again, ScaleArc can help you mitigating that downtime. So basically, you can perhaps do it more at will, or you can do it in the periods that you actually need that capacity. And then perhaps you might scale it down a little bit over the other periods. And what you wouldn't essentially be introducing downtime throughout those periods. So this is a huge aspect of ScaleArc in the cloud. Same as on premises. Of course, on premises you would probably not be as quick to change, to scale up, to add CPUs, to add memory, because that requires actual hardware manipulation. But ScaleArc can help you in both those situations, and particularly in the cloud, there where you can actually scale on demand and utilizing zero downtime. The same for scale out, of course. Each of those platforms provide a scale out functionality, but none of them provides the automatic read-write split, such as ScaleArc. If you move into the cloud because of cost effectiveness of the cloud, of course, there is a valid reason. Sometimes the licenses are cheaper when you provision hardware in the cloud. Sometimes the hardware itself is cheaper to maintain in the cloud. And absolutely, that's the case. Now, with ScaleArc, you can perhaps further reduce the hardware need by utilizing such features like connection multiplexing, which reduces your hardware pressure, or utilizing cache, or being able to easily scale out the traffic that perhaps weren't coded to be to be routed to the read-only replicas. So all of this you can actually benefit from in the cloud, in particularly with the kind of peak periods. So a lot of times within the database universe, what we found, our customers are provisioning for their peak usage, and that's a right approach. You don't want your database to struggle during the peak usage. But at the same time, a lot of this peak usage is a read traffic. So, and a lot of this traffic can actually be cached. And utilizing this cache, you might actually mitigate your need for this over provisioning of your hardware. And perhaps even if you do need it, eventually you can actually observe the trends within ScaleArc and forecast that need ahead of time. So all of this ScaleArc can help you with in the cloud. If you move to the cloud for a high availability, absolutely. The cloud provides you high availability on the network layer, on the server layer, on the kind of all the hardware layer, storage, and all of this. But it doesn't provide you the high availability on the database, on the query level, on the database level. And this is where ScaleArc comes in. Essentially, the zero downtime, the search queue can buffer traffic for you, can provide you the seamless experience of any downtime, any failovers, any failures in your system. And last, the security aspect. Cloud gives us a lot of promises about the security of the network, security of the virtual private clouds, the firewalls, the encryption of the traffic. Of course, absolutely, those are all valuable assets to have in our project. But ScaleArc can give you even further, even a little bit more to that, to their tool set. Can add you the ability to provide this last line of defense, SQL level firewall feature, whereby you can prevent any drop statements, whereby you can perhaps write your regular expressions to prevent SQL injection, and all of those can be actually this can be embedded in your SQL. And of course, the best practice is to prevent this on the application level. But the defensive approach would be, why not? We can also include those rules in this kind of SQL firewall within ScaleArc. So this is the kind of overview, and I'm going to jump into a little bit more detailed list now of main features of ScaleArc. And I'm not going to jump into each of those. There is quite a lot of them here on this list. What I want to show on this table is basically all the features that ScaleArc was built for, all the reasons why we basically we have ScaleArc in our infrastructure. We're leveraging those benefits of it, and how does that fit within the kind of platform as a service or database as a service environments within the cloud? And a few things that you might notice here, that majority of these features are just basically not available within the cloud. So the likes of transparent caching or replicational aware load balancing, transparent read-write split, all of those require ScaleArc to be in the infrastructure to have those features. Now some of the features perhaps are promised by the cloud, such as high availability or the ability to scale up. And yes, those features are available in the cloud, but unfortunately, the higher availability of a cloud does not guarantee you zero downtime. The ability to scale up, again, it brings downtime to the equation. So all of those aspects actually can benefit from ScaleArc again. In order to have zero downtime, we need to have a way of holding the traffic. We need to have a way of shielding away application from any downtime, any resynchronization, any failover impact within our database environment, and therefore we need ScaleArc for that. So this is all in all, this like this was an overview of what can we migrate, how can we migrate, and what benefits can it bring, this migration, if we use ScaleArc within the cloud. And I guess to conclude my session, I'm going to move over to if we have any questions. Susan?
Thanks, Larry. We did actually get one question in today. Can ScaleArc be deployed in mixed active/active/passive deployment?
Yeah, so in some circumstances, you might want to have this kind of double failure paradigm, whereby after one failure, you can perhaps, before you kind of reconfigure, before you do something within your environment, you might still want to be capable of handling another failure, but you don't necessarily need a fully active with 3 active nodes. And in this case, yes, absolutely, you can deploy one node passive. Of course, it would be paired to one of the active nodes only, not to both of them. But regardless of that, this would basically be possible in this way.
That is all the questions we have for today, Larry. On behalf of Ignite Technologies, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.